instigates the Syrian civil war that had been going on for years after that. So this was the end of a 1260 time period, according to a lunar calendar. Pretty incredible. And so, I couldn't help but think, but, all the miracles that happened to true Israel was before they were divorced from Yahweh and went into Babylonian captivity. Not to say that that Israel can't repent. Yahweh's hand has been outstretched since then. And nothing has come forward on the part of the Israelis. So the adversary has his timetable, as we're told in Daniel 7:25, that he's come to change times and laws. And if you think about any element of time, he has adulterated that according to a scriptural model. Now, when we start with part 2, we're going to look at some other 1260-day patterns. So we'll go ahead and jump in with part 2. Jackson?
Sounds like a plan.
Okay. Okay, so parts. Okay, so many of us are familiar with the blood moons that happened just a few years ago, that happened on the lunar feast days through the course of the years of 2014 and 2015, that was punctuated in the middle with a solar eclipse that happened right over Jerusalem. Again, this is a wake-up call for Jerusalem. This is a wake-up call for all those that are counting their feasts by the moon. It's not a biblical model. It may be a working model, but it's not the scriptural one. So here's an interesting thing to add into this picture. These 4 blood moons with the solar eclipse in the middle, all this was in the middle of a 7-year cycle. There was a blood moon on June 15th of 2011 over Jerusalem, and another over Jerusalem on July 27th, 2018. And that one happened to be the longest in the past 18 years. And so here we have, this is like incredible. You couldn't ask for more signs. And it just so happens that June and July is giving you a little bit over a month prior to the Day of Atonement. Hey, I'm giving you guys more than a month's time to wake up and say, hey, we got the Day of Atonement coming up. Is there a reason why this blood moon happened? Are we supposed to reconsider our actions, our coming before Yahweh? Those people that talked about that other timeline, maybe they were right. Maybe we need to go back to the Hebrew and really evaluate what our words mean.
Definitely.
So here's a little timeline. So considering that, a Shemitah has its beginning on the Day of Atonement, if we look at Leviticus 25 specifically, and it just so happens that 2011, according to the 7-year cycle that I've determined, if we recognizing that, Yahweh doesn't change, he's perfect from the beginning, so his Shemitah cycles must have started if that time period that the correction that we made in the chronology is to Adam's beginning. If we determine the Shemitahs from that point, 2011 would have been the beginning of a Shemitah. And so here we have a legitimate Shemitah based upon that in 2011, and prior to that was the blood moon. So on the Day of Atonement, when Israel should have come forward to Yahweh and asked for forgiveness for many things, there was a blood moon, right, prior to that time. And so here's the Day of Atonement, 7-year time period, all the way up to 2018, and again, another blood moon before that Day of Atonement. Again, he's saying, hey, wake up. I'm giving you 7 years, guys, to figure this thing out. Now remember, half of 7 is 3.5 years, right? So we have two 1,260-day cycles or 42 months, however you want to look at that, to comprise a total of 7 years. That's a week of years that Daniel refers to in Daniel 9. So the last true Shemitahs of the 6th millennium, Yahweh's trying to get Israel's attention. And so this pattern is meant to be a warning to all believers. So with all these blood moons, just prior to the start of the last week of years, in the middle and during their feast, just before the last DOA of the last week of this millennium, I see this as a denigration of all the feasts on a full moon. So what is the book of Jubilees? We gave a little bit of credence to the idea that Jubilees should really possibly, if you will, be part of Scripture. What does Jubilees say about this lunar concept? Does it say anything about it? Well, it just so happens in Jubilees 6, here's a section of verses 32 through 37. I'm actually going to put these up here. I'm going to read this through for you. And it says, and command you, the children of Israel, that they should observe the years according to this reckoning, 364 days. And these will constitute a complete year, and they will not disturb its time from its days and from its feasts. But if they do neglect and do not observe them according to his commandment, then they will disturb all their seasons, and the years will be dislodged from this order. Can you imagine that? Actually says that the years are going to be dislodged. And that's exactly what we have, because the Jews say we got another 200 years plus before we're coming to 6,000 years, right?
Try to convince somebody. I mean, it's like trying to pull teeth.
Yeah.
Even if you show them all the very many proofs that the new moon idea is has been put in there by the Mazzaroths or something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, you have a book on this, as you said, and I still have a couple of copies.
Okay.
That are for sale. If somebody wants them, you can go out and see them on kingdomcart.com. Kingdomcart with a K.com. Pick one up.
Okay. And so consequently, if they do not follow this, it says they're going to neglect their ordinances. We're going to show, and this book, these verses are going to be a little more specific to that in a moment here. And all the children of Israel will forget and will not find the path of the years. There it is again. And will forget the new months and seasons and feast Sabbaths, and they will go wrong as to all the orders of the years. There it is again. For on heavenly tablets the division of days is ordained, lest they forget the feast of the covenant and walk according to the feast of the Gentiles, i.e. lunar calendar, after their error, after their ignorance. For there will be those who will assuredly make observations of the moon and how it disturbs the seasons, comes in from year 10 days too soon, right? So you guys see the difference on that. We know that the lunar calendar is at 354. Here we are talking about a 364. And for this reason, the years will come upon them when they will disturb the order and make an abominable day, the day of testimony, and an unclean day, a feast day. And they will confound all the days, the holy with the unclean, and the unclean day with the holy. What does this mean? Essentially what's going to happen, I'm going to use the Day of Atonement as an example. And with following the feast with the lunar calendar, invariably the year is going to come when the Day of Atonement is going to fall on a Sunday, which I see that as an abomination. Especially when you consider everything, all the elements around and the practices involved with the Day of Atonement. It's all about sevens. It's all about not just being on the 7th month, but the Sabbath. The book of Jubilees tells us why the Day of Atonement is on a Sabbath. That's in chapter 34. And to finish this section, and they will go wrong as to the months and Sabbaths, feasts, and Jubilees. Sorry, that came off the screen there. So we may ask, is there a 1260-day prophecy that includes sun, moon, and stars that would equate to these last days? Now, we just looked at this total solar eclipse that's going to be in perigee going across the United States again in 2024. And just to give recognition now, the 1260, again, this is based on a 360-day calendar. And again, the 364 is nothing but a intercalated 360-day calendar, as Enoch describes. Now, this is taken from Enoch 75, verse 1. And he says, and the leaders and the heads of thousands, who are over all creation and over all the stars, are also with the 4 intercalary days, which cannot be separated from their places according to the whole reckoning of the years, and these serve the 4 days, which are not counted in the reckoning of the years. They're only utilized in the account of determining the essence of where your feasts are going to go. But in the course of counting your years, you don't consider that. And this is why Daniel, who I believe was a student of Enoch, and likely John the Revelator as well, and some of the other prophets, when they make correlations to times, and half a time, to any pattern that relates to a divisibility of 360, these guys were students of Enoch, because they understood that Yahweh is the same yesterday, today, and forever, that he doesn't change, that he was perfect from the beginning, that 360 is his timetable, and he's only accommodating us, in this case, for 4 days because of sin. And yet his timetable, he's saying, you know, we're still going to be using my perfect numbers here. So blood moons punctuated with a dark moon before the sun, a solar eclipse, these are dark omens on a lunar calendar. These are all talked about in the last 8 chapters in the Gospels. Okay, now here's an event we're going to discuss that happened also in 2017. In fact, it was just shortly after that total solar eclipse in August. This happened in September 23rd, 2017, where the woman of Revelation 12 made itself known in the stars. Now, I'm not proposing astrology, but I am going to present what I believe to be true Hebrew astronomy. Okay? Well, it just so happens that September the 23rd, 2017, was the Enochian Day of Atonement. And mind you, the Day of Atonement always is supposed to fall on a 7th-day Sabbath, which equates, again, to all the elements of what the priests were doing on that day. And it just so happens that what was special about this particular day with the lining of the stars with Virgo, the planets closest to the Earth were lining up and did come in line on September 23rd of that year. So let's look at Revelation 12 and see how some of these constellations and stars that we're going to talk about, how they fit into this mention in Revelation 12. So as a great wonder is seen in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Now, it doesn't show it in this picture, but we're going to go to some other pictures, but it's going to show where Virgo is basically standing, if you will, on top of the moon. She is clothed with the sun because at this point of the year, the Virgo is in the sun. So consequently, she's clothed with the sun. Okay. The constellation of 12 stars, that crown that's above her head, happens to be the constellation Leo. We're going to see that in a moment. And it goes on, and she being with child cried, travailing in birth, pain to be delivered. Now you'll notice that the planet Jupiter, that's a little blown up here, is within the torso of the constellation of Virgo, i.e. as if it would be within her womb. And we're going to see how that planet moves. So Jupiter, being the largest of the planet stars, we could make a correlation that this is Judah, that Jupiter relates to Judah, and the child of Judah being Yeshua, was in the region of her womb, moving this direction to between her legs, as if in giving birth while standing on the moon.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, can you imagine trying to give birth while standing on the moon? So here's the constellation of Leo above Virgo. This is the crown of 12 stars above her head. And here are the stars that line up within our solar system. We basically have Venus here. This is Regulus, which is probably the brightest star in Leo. Regulus, and then we have Venus, Mars, and Mercury. We have the Sun, and then Jupiter. These guys are all lined up by September 23rd. You'll notice that Jupiter is now outside the womb, has been birthed, if you will, now between the legs of the constellation of Virgo. You also notice now some of these other constellation here. Here is a constellation, looks like a giant snake. We're going to talk about him a little bit later. And then there's another constellation just above her, T'Voώτης, and we're going to talk about that one too. But let's take a moment, let's look a little closer at Leo for a moment. Now, some of the amateur astrologists would tell you that there's only 9 stars in Leo, and then they go ahead and they count these 3 planetary stars to give you 12, which is not actually proper. I'll show you that here in a minute. So oh yeah, to give some idea as to, gee, has this not happened before? Not to this extent. I will say that these planets lining up have never been done prior to any understanding that we know of. Now, there was 4 other times just in the last 1,000 years where they came close to lining up, and these are the dates mentioned here. And so about every 250 years or so, it seems to come close. But this particular time, it's been many, many thousands of years. Some say as many as 7,000 years that the last time anything happened with this lining up the way it is. Because I make a comment here that we do have a perfect line, equidistance between the planets, and it also just happened to be right on the Enochian Day of Atonement. And so I couldn't help but think of a couple of verses and relevant to this, but this is, the heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the works of his hands. And this is going to have some correlation to developments that are going to happen on the earth, I believe.
Amazing.
So when he says, thy kingdom come, what's that?
That was 2017.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. And so in our Savior says, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Now that's talking about, anyway, you can take that as it is, but even as Abraham, if you read the book of Jasher, which is mentioned in Scripture, talks about evaluating the constellations. You read the book of Job, Job talks about various constellations. And so, not to be construed with astrology, but there is a place for astronomy in Hebrew. There's a whole study called the Mazzaroth, which is the Hebrew understanding of constellations. You can probably Google that and find various different approaches from biblical perspective on what we understand the Mazzaroth to be today.
Yeah, I'm
going to give you a little bit of that. What's that, Jackson?
We've got 2 or 3 on that Barry, I can't think of his last name, did a couple of years ago. They're
okay.
Good.
Good. Okay. Okay, let's blow up Leo here. Let's look now. We'll see where they have the 9 stars here, but let's go ahead and count these up, and then I'll show you where the other stars are that are part of this constellation. So we have Regulus here. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But then you got the paw, outstretched paw. There's 10. Then you got the back legs. You got 11, 12, or at least 11, 12, and maybe 13. You know, could that be considered part of that? You know, maybe that would be a counterfeit to that extent, you know, because 12 means, gematria-wise, means governmental perfection. 13 means revolution, actually. But yeah, so many people look at Leo actually having 12 stars. And so here we have the 3 planets lining up that aren't really part of that. It's not part of the crown. But now here's a very interesting slide in respect to this whole element that happened. You'll notice that this planet Jupiter came into the torso region of Virgo around November 20th, 2016, and stayed within the womb area, the torso, generally speaking, within Virgo for a total of 9 months. Kind of incredible. That was from November 20th, 2016 to September 9, 2017, is when Jupiter basically crossed the plane between these 2 stars here. Spica, I'm not sure what the other name is here, but actually crossed this plane. But it wasn't fully delivered. In other words, Jupiter didn't come all the way out until it's properly delivered, right? But it was crowning, essentially, at this point, at September 9th. But the incredible element of this is the fact that Jupiter residing within this general vicinity within the womb of Virgo for 9 months.